Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here. In this video, we're going to talk about how do you actually use references for your 3D projects. This is a topic which has been heavily requested, so we'll talk about this. Before this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and also tap that little notification bell to stay up to date on everything we do. Now, the reason we use reference is really because most people, well, every single person, doesn't know what anything looks like. And that is one hell of a statement to make, but we can back it up. We showed this picture, a similar picture recently in one of our videos. And basically nobody realized that this is a giraffe with zebra stripes on it. When we saw this real statue of this in Hong Kong, we were like, yeah, that's a totally fine giraffe. That's how giraffes look like. So it really is when people can't identify, at least Morten and I can identify that this was not how a giraffe looked, then you start to question everything else. Do you know what a giraffe looks like? Do you have any idea what anything looks like? And the truth is that you need reference. You need reference to look to really know what things look like. But this is not a video to really talk about why you should use reference. This is a video where we're going to talk about how to use reference. This is something we haven't really seen covered a lot, so let's get into that. So here we have a picture of a Nile crocodile. This is a really complex animal, and if you're trying to replicate this animal here now, it's like, let's say you want to sculpt it, it's very hard. And this image here contains way more data than you might think. Just from looking at this, you might start to sculpt it up, and you might fall into the trap where you're adding far too much detail right away. You see all the tiny little creases here, little wrinkles, the patterns, the tiny little shells around his, scales around his eyes, all these kind of things. They are, it's so easy to put this into your drawing or into your 3D models. So we need to learn to simplify what we have. I usually just do this in my mind. You've been doing this for such a long time that you kind of know what to look for, that you kind of start to see the big picture as you go along. But we'll just show you how you can do this as well. So starting with the original, we now used a cutout filter on this. You can find this in the filter gallery, and you can choose cutout. This is a really useful filter because this allows you to really simplify down what it looks like. It's going to take all the tiny details and just merge them into one really nice shape. So here you can see that clearly the scales on the neck are really important. Clearly the big scales here are also really important, and that is more mushy around the face. So if you were to sculpt this, you really need to be very specific when it comes to these scales around here. And when it comes to this area, it's harder to be that specific. So maybe you want to be very clean here in the beginning. And you can kind of see a shape going up here, another shape here, and another shape going down here. So you can really simplify the image down into something which you can actually work from. The next up, we blur the image. We have a video on this as well, talking about sculpting mid-frequency in ZBrush, and we use a blurred example there as well, because it's really hard to look at this image and just sculpt what you're seeing, because there is just too much information there. With the cutout and the blurred version of it, we're able to simplify down drastically. And you can see the same thing is true here as well. You can see that most of this is just simplified into one big shape. Same as here, there are a few plane changes. But the big things is you see this region here, you see all the tiny little scales here. You see the scales on his foot or leg. You see the teeth are definitely here, and you see the overall silhouette. So whenever you're sculpting this, it's really important to either simplify it down in something like Photoshop or just visualize this just in the mind's third eye.
And visualizing is something that just comes with experience. You can't just do it from the get-go. That's why sort of utilizing Photoshop as a tool to force you to visualize it in this way is really helpful, because then you start to train that in your mind, and then that's how you're going to start approaching doing these kinds of characters, sculpts in the future. You'll automatically start to maybe you squint your eyes a little bit, you try to gauge what the silhouette is, what the big forms are, and then you just start to work from there.
What you can also do, you can blur the living hell out of this, and then you can have different versions of blur. You can have one which is blurred like 100 pixels, and you can literally just get the blobby shape from it. And then you can have a shape which is blurred by 20 pixels, and then 2 pixels, and then at the end there's nothing. And then you're just kind of progressively getting to a result which you can actually use for real reference, because now you're kind of just sculpting what you're seeing, and you can't sculpt any finer stuff because you can't see it. But on the other hand, there's also so much information in this picture here as well, which there's so much high frequency here as well, which you aren't really seeing now as well. So there is a point in your scope where you have to get into all the high frequency. And you can do this by high-passing the image. Highpass is an awesome filter, which really allows you to get to squeeze out all of this really, really nice detailing. So here you can really see, right? You can see all the tiny little creases and all the little texture variation for it. So if you are doing the really high-frequency sculpting of it, or drawing, texture painting, whatever it might be, now you can truly see all of this.
Yeah, and especially if you're doing it for sculpting, even the high-pass filter can then be converted directly into an alpha that you could use in ZBrush, maybe with a little bit of cleanup. I think we've done a video about that actually.
Yeah, we have. If you were to take this area here, for instance, and then just blur it a lot and then clean it up a little bit, this will actually be a really brilliant alpha you can use directly in ZBrush. But you wouldn't be able to do this unless you process the image. You really can't use this here for much because there is so much lighting information and color information, and there's just too much information in this picture. Then the last thing we're going to look at is you can actually use this for texturing as well, like straight up figuring out what color it is. Now this is not the exact accurate color you would get from it. You can see that it's a lot more saturated in this version. But even so, it's good to enhance that a little bit because everything loses saturation in the shader. So now you can actually start to see more of the flatness, see some of the true color which is here without too much lighting. This is an amazing feature. I just got to show you this because this is such a handy feature. If you go to Photoshop, you go to Image, Adjustment, and it's under Shadow and Highlights. And you can just play with these settings here like crazy, and you can just really see that you're getting this really flat and nice result. This is how I treat every single texture map I get, regardless of how processed the texture map is. I will take it through Shadow Highlights and just squeeze out the last drop of texture information. So here you can really see how much information there is in this picture from all these 4 versions of it. The next up, we are going to take a look at an actual project. So here is a piece I worked on many years ago. This is Bob, and he is the king of the ocean, and he's also a turtle. So whenever I'm sculpting characters like this, I'm gathering as much reference as I possibly can. So I tried to get a reference for every single piece. Now, full disclosure, when I did this, I didn't. I was freestyling a bit too much here. But this is how I would do it today, and definitely how I would do it in a production. So I would find reference of every single piece. You would look at this shell, get picture of that. You would find maybe some anime eyes for his eyes. You can see his eyes here are really like, they're very stylized. They're almost like anime eyes. Then we have like full-on snapping turtle faces. You can see here I actually used this picture for the reference. You can see here the beak is very similar. This kind of reference here is also amazing because it has this really nice leather feel onto it, which you can get areas like this. You can maybe even use the texture directly. You can use the shadow highlights feature we just talked about to really use this as a texture map directly. Then we can look at something like a humpback whale, and we can look at specifically more generally, we can look at the overall gesture of it, which is something I want to get across in this part of it. Then I just took the same part, I think it's from this piece here, and just scaled it up so I can look specifically at his arm or his fin. And you see these little Nemo fishes, the clownfish, and we want reference for every single piece. For the anatomy, try to get as close to the real animals as you can. This is very important when you're sculpting. So here's a snapping turtle skull, and here's a turtle skeleton. And can't really find anything for the muscles, so I'm trying to find the closest thing, which in this case would probably be something like a dolphin or a whale or something. Turns out it's a bit hard to find dissections of blue whales or humpback whales. The biggest creatures ever to live.
Like a pretty big operating table.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. Just general whale tongues, they're awesome, as big as a car. You can also have something like this, which isn't necessarily exactly what you want, but it can represent a feeling you want. Like, this is a really lovely picture. It just has this calm, zen feeling about it. And it's kind of something like that I want to get across as well. But then you can find very specific cases as well, like you need to know what knots look like. And why do you need that? Well, because his crown has knots on it. You need to have an idea of what these things actually look like. Again, remember the giraffe zebra image. The moment you start to assume you know what something looks like, you can be pretty sure that you don't know what it looks like. You can also use it for texture reference directly. Like, you can take these parts here and just straight up take them into Painter or Mari and just plaster them onto it and just see how it works. So that's like a quick way of showing you how you can use reference. An advantage of using reference as well is that if you're showing this to a supervisor, this happened all the time to me, where you're sculpting something like this and he's like, you got to change the arm. Wouldn't work like that. And now you can just show like, hey, here's my reference. It looks exactly like that. You have something to tie it to. In this case, you're at least like protecting yourself because you have a clear idea of, or you can kind of backtrack your thought process, and they can still tell you to change it because they're your boss. But at least you have something, like you have some photographic truth to refer to. So I really hope this video here has been helpful, and it's shed some light on not just why you should use reference, but specifically how you can use reference. For me, there are two main things to take away from this video here. The first one is that whenever you're doing any project, you should try to find reference for every single piece. It's going to take you a few hours, but if you spend a few weeks on a project, you get these hours back like tenfold. And second off, you should learn to analyze references. You should learn to take an original picture with a lot of detail and break it down into simpler parts which are easy for you to understand and digest. Particularly these kind of complex things, there's so much going on here. So let us know if you want to see more videos like this in the future, going more into the core art concepts of how to read reference, whatever it might be. Let us know in the comments, and hopefully we can make videos on that. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and also hit the little notification bell.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for training or high quality assets, make sure to stop by the FlippedNormals marketplace. And if you're interested in supporting us by buying our merchandise, you can check that out in the description below.